It is May 19th, 2022. We're at the Pyle Center. I'm Michelle Hirsch with Carl Harris and Verne Abe Harris. Thank you so much for being here to share your life story. Usually we start with when and where you were born, but I want to start a little bit different, and that is how you met, when you got married, and then we can go back to when you were born. But
Okay.
you're such a wonderful couple. I thought, let's start where you guys started together.
Well, we first met, she was working in Brad's coffee shop, and I would go in and I would always order like a strawberry pie with as much whipped cream as you could put on it, and she was the only one that would do that. So that was my first time that I saw her, and I had her little brother in school in one of my physical education classes, and she was a little too young for me to
I was jailbait.
to date. So
I was only 16, and he was a 22-year-old graduate assistant at the university.
Ah.
So anyway, yeah, we finally got together and went on a date after she graduated and all of that, and we ended up getting married on my birthday on July 3rd, 1971. That was one of the best days of my life because she's been a rock by my side for pretty near 51 years now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, your anniversary's coming up in July then. Oh, that's excellent. Well, that's fun. I since you're together, I thought it would be fun to start out with, when you met and got married. So let's back up a little bit and ask each one of you, when and where were you born? We'll start with Carl and then Laverne.
Okay, I was born in Glendale, Arizona in July 3rd, 1945, and my dad was a cotton farmer there, and he had a huge impact on my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I learned a couple of things from him that really stayed with me through my whole life up to this point, and especially in my teaching and coaching. And that there are two things that I really remember that stuck out, and one of them being that through his example of his life, the way he lived it, and his relations with other people, I learned the meaning of integrity. And the second thing that I really learned from him was to have a good work ethic. If you had a job to do, you stayed with that job until it was done and done right. You didn't quit in the middle of it because you felt like you were a little fatigued, or that you wanted to go hang out with the guys or go to a movie or whatever. That was
Those are wonderful lessons to learn from a parent and be inspired by. Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 5 brothers and a sister. My mother was killed in a traffic accident when I was 5 years old, and that left my dad to raise us 7 kids without a mother, and he did. So.
Wow. Oh, I am so sorry for that kind of loss, but that just even goes to show even more what a strong influence your dad was in your life. Laverne, how about telling us when and where you were born and a little bit about your family? And I'm also going to ask you to share about your parents' World War II love story.
Okay. All right. I was born January 27th, 1952, in Fort Riley, Kansas. My father, I'm an Army brat, and my dad was military, and during World War II, he was in the 442nd, the Japanese American Battalion, and he was the only son in a family in Washington State, and there were only 2 Japanese families in that town, and he was in college, and he was actually an engineering major, aeronautical engineering major, but he thought that for the safety of his family, it would be best that he enrolled in the Army to show that he was a good citizen. And in the process, he met my mother, who was in Germany, fleeing from Hitler, and it took him, I think, 2 years to get like 86 signatures to show that she did not belong to anything associated with Hitler. She was not very political, and that's the only way that the United States would allow him to get married to her and bring her to the United States. And so that's what happened, and so we always joke around that I'm a rice schnitzel. But that was their love story, and they had an incredible marriage, and my sweet husband Carl ended up being my father's best friend, and my mother told me, and you can't play this in front of my brothers, but told me that he was like the son, because he was so much like my father and the things that he liked to do, that she just felt like he was her son too. So,
how fun to have those kind of family blessings and relationships. So tell us how you both ended up either together or separate coming to Tempe.
I came to Tempe in college. I first enrolled down at the University of Arizona, and I was going to study pre-med, and I was on the football team there, and at the end of that first year, I was in a serious accident that in fact, it virtually ended my playing at that time, and so I started soul searching and decided that I wanted to be a PE teacher and a coach, because I look back through the years and I had some great coaches and I had some really super teachers, and I thought that what a great career that would be. So at that time I made the best choice in my life that I don't regret one bit through all the years, and I ended up transferring to ASU and enrolled in the physical education program, and I was on the swim team for 3 years there. So.
Oh, okay.
And I'll add a side note to that. He was actually a straight A student in pre-med, and his coach, his football coach at the U of A, was really a little rattled that he wanted to go into education since he was a straight A student in pre-med, and said, well, maybe you should be a pediatrician if you like children so much. But I think about that, and our life would have been completely different, but I would never have met him.
Oh.
And so, the decisions that you make in your life lead you to where you're supposed to be.
Yes. So you came to Tempe when, Laverne?
I came to Tempe in 1966. My father was supposed to be transferred to Hawaii. We were all supposed to go to Hawaii. And he found out from one of the people that is in the office that knows where you're going to end up being, and found out that we were going to go to Hawaii, but then he would be sent to Vietnam. And we had a family meeting, and my dad was in the Korean War, and he was in World War II, and we said 3 wars is too many wars for you. And he was a command sergeant major, and he had worked for the Pentagon in DC, and we just said, why don't we skip that step and go retire in Arizona? And he had been offered a job teaching ROTC at ASU. And so we decided we could go on vacation to Hawaii instead of having my dad go to Vietnam. So that's how I ended up in Arizona and Tempe.
And so did you go to high school in Tempe?
Yes.
Was it Tempe High?
No,
Oh.
it was it was the first year, one of the first years that McClintock High School opened. And I came there because I wanted to be on the swim team. And it was the only school that had this wonderful Olympic-sized pool. And I remember one of Carl's friends was the coach. I didn't know Carl till I was 16. So I was 14 years old and I went to go sign up to be on the swim team. And I went up to the coach and I said, you know, sign me up, I want to be on the swim team. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, they don't have a girls swim team. And I said, that's no problem, put me on the boys swim team. And he said, well, you can practice with the boys, but you can't compete against them. And you know, I grew up with brothers, and that didn't make any sense to me. So I remember saying to him, why? Are you afraid I'm going to beat them? I didn't understand. And so that's how that ended up. But I went to McClintock and loved it. It was right in the middle of all these farm fields, and I was not a country gal and rode my bicycle diagonally through one of the poor farmers' fields. And he had to tell me later what a terrible thing I did. So that's how I ended up.
So what were you involved in high school besides swimming, if any? Were you involved in other?
Well, I wasn't in swimming, obviously, because they wouldn't let me. So
Okay.
I was a cheerleader and a pom-pom girl, and I was on National Honor Society and art club, and then I was one of the speakers at our graduation.
And was the job was it Bristol's? Did you say it was called? The coffee shop? Or
Brad's coffee shop.
Was that your first job?
I mean, I babysat before, but I started working there, and I got, you know, lots of tips because I worked really hard, and I managed. I started when I was 16, and when I graduated from high school, I made 90 cents an hour plus tips, and I had $10,000 stashed in the bank.
Wow, that's impressive.
I bought a set of art books that I still have in my bookcase, and Carl says, how come you didn't, you know, spend the rest of the money? And I said, well, whenever you'd go out on a date, they'd pay for it all. So I didn't have to pay for it. But I had a crush on him since I was 16. But, you know, obviously, you know, we didn't date till I went to college. So.
And so you knew each other because you would come in to, Carl, you would come into the coffee shop, and then you started ASU. And did one of you say, you know, okay, you're old enough now, or what prompted?
Not really. Like I mentioned earlier, her younger brother was one of my students at McCamey Junior High. That was the first school that I worked at, as in the Tempe School District, and he was one of my students, and I didn't know Laverne was his sister, but he said, you know, I've got a sister that I think would like to go out with you. And I said, oh yeah? And anyway, we sort of hooked up that way. I agreed to go to an ASU basketball game to meet her, and
do you want
I
to know
already
the
knew
real
her.
truth?
Yes.
Okay. This is the real truth. The real truth is I lived in Manzita Hall with my best girlfriend, Yvonne. And Carl remembers me, but he always thought I had a boyfriend. So he actually called on the phone, and back then there were no cell phones. It was a wall phone in the dorm, and he actually called and asked her out. And she knew I had had a crush on him, and she says, I know someone who would really like to talk to you. And I was so humiliated. She handed the phone to me, and so that's how it really happened.
Wow.
Well, I can tell everybody watching is happy that it worked out that way, because that's a wonderful story, and it worked out to where you did get to go out and then get married. Do you have children? Can you tell us about your children?
Yeah, we have two children. Tanya is the older child, and she went through McClintock also. They went through the elementary school, junior high, and she went to McClintock, and my son he went through the elementary, junior high in Tempe, and then he went to Tempe High.
Okay. There's a little bit of a rivalry sometimes between McClintock and Tempe Union. So I'm trying to be diplomatic, but yeah, so that had to be
Carl
interesting.
was coaching at Tempe High, and my son was an athlete.
Oh.
And so he went
That makes
there.
sense.
And my daughter went to McClintock High School because she had intended to go to Tempe High School. But when she was in the 8th grade, she went to visit her dad, and all the high school guys were talking about her in the locker room. And he went in the locker room and said, if any of you ever ask my daughter out, you're off this team. So she decided she'd have a very boring life in high school if she went to Tempe High. That's why she went to McClintock. That's the truth.
Carl, thank goodness Laverne is here to tell us the whole story, right?
She's good at reminding me of what I thought I knew.
But our daughter teaches gifted kindergarten, and our son is the CEO of USA Triathlon with the Paralympics and the Olympics.
Wow. So obviously you were an influence being a teacher. So you graduated from ASU. We'll back up a little bit. You graduated from ASU and went into teaching. And did you start in Tempe Elementary?
Yes, I did. After I completed my master's degree in physical education at ASU, that was my first job at McCamey. I took that in 1969, and we had a wonderful staff there also with fellow physical education teachers, Mike Coffinger and Steve Fedorchik, and a really good administration with Ralph Lingerfeld, and who was a principal at that time, and Joe Spricali was the assistant principal, just a superman, and I learned so much from him. But yeah, and I coached football, basketball, and track during the years I was there, and then I also coached the Tempe Rhinos, which was the large kids in Pop Warner. I did that for 3 years while I was there.
And
my father was his assistant coach, and I was the cheer coach. So that was always
quite a family affair.
That was a fun time. Yes.
And then your son was obviously an athlete at Tempe High, so you must have moved over to Tempe High at some point.
No, I moved. That was before he was born, really. When I was at McCamey, and I went from McCamey Junior High to Marcos Deniza in 1973, and I stayed there 11 years till '84, and coached football and track there, and once again had some really good people to work with and some great kids. We had a principal was Bill Cox at that time, and then Carl Honecker and Vic Sanchez was the assistant principals, and I had a chance to work with some really good coaches there.
It's so wonderful for you to recall some of the names of the people that you worked with, because as part of the Life Stories Project, so many people will remember those names or also recall working with those people. So that's really fun to hear you recall the people you worked with, and so Marcos Deniza, and then after that, did you go
After
to
that, in 1984, I went over to really join one of my almost lifelong friends, Tim McBurney, that was already there, and we all coached football and track together for a year or so.
Tempe High.
Yeah.
At Tempe High, and once again some really good teachers to work with and coaches, and guys like Tim McBurney, and of course Glenn Alford was the head coach when I first went over there, and Manny Acosta, and just a lot of good good people. And then Vic Sanchez came over and became the principal after a while there. So it was a good situation with him and Jim Randall, that was the athletic director, and so I had a really fun career.
And I read about a lot of recognitions and awards. Do you recall any of your awards or recognitions that you got for coaching?
Well, I received quite a few, but I at times are hesitant to talk about them. But I won the Teacher of the Year at Tempe High one year in '93, and then I was selected as a 4A assistant coach of the year in football, and that was just a few of the honors. But
did you finish your career at Basha, or no? You stayed in Tempe Union.
I stayed at Tempe High, and I retired in '97 from teaching.
Oh, okay.
But I coached till 2002 there, and then we went over, Coach McBurney and I went over to start Basha High School in 2002.
Okay, so you got to head over to Chandler a little bit.
Yeah, he wanted a new challenge, and
yeah.
He said, "I need someone to mess me up." You know, so.
I'm going to add to your story.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing about when Carl was at Tempe High, of course, my son was at Tempe High at the time, and Carl, would be put in hours and hours in coaching, and he would come home late because many of the players that he had lived in the part of town where their parents didn't pick them up, and they literally had to walk miles to go home. So at that time, you could pile people in the back of your pickup truck, and he would take every one of them home before he got home. And then when he'd walk through the door, there was at least 8 boys at our house eating dinner almost every day, and we didn't even get to count them on our income tax. But Carl would go, "Oh, didn't I just see you guys?" And he would walk to the back room. But that's kind of how our life was, and our kids grew up thinking that every family grew up at the stadiums, or watching sports or that kind of thing.
Well, what a fun, positive way to influence your kids, though. I mean, obviously your daughter went into teaching, and your son went into athletics and teaching in a way. So what a wonderful influence you've been. And so I know you are also, let's talk to you, Laverne, about you went to ASU.
Yes.
And take it from there. Yeah.
Well, I went to ASU, and I got a scholarship, full ride scholarship. So did he at the U of A. So it was an academic scholarship, and then after that I went and got my master's degree at ASU, and then years later I went to the University of Arizona and I got my PhD. And now remember, I was only 19 when I got married, so I was doing all of this with the support of Carl and while I had children. So it was quite a different experience than I think most people have, and
can you share what areas that you got your degree in? Because I think it's very impressive. So it's fun for people to know.
Well, for my bachelor's degree, I was in art education and commercial art, which is graphic design. And then my master's degree was a Master of Technology. And then my PhD was in higher education with an emphasis on media arts.
And so at this point, you, I think, are accomplished in research and teaching and in technology and several areas in communications and visual arts, and do you want to talk more about the work you've done at ASU?
Sure. Well, I actually had a huge career before I even went to ASU. I was art director for the Phoenix Gazette, and I owned my own company. Carl was my business manager, and we had a place up in Pine Top, and on the top part of the studio was where I did my computer graphics work, and he did all of the bookkeeping and stuff. And then ASU called me at the time. I'd worked in industry for a number of years as a graphic designer and etc. So every skill that I'd learned helped me get on to the next thing. So ASU called me and asked if I would come and be a lecturer at ASU. And I did. And then I became an assistant professor. And then I drove to the University of Arizona while I was full-time teaching at ASU to get my PhD. And then Purdue University had been trying to get a hold of me for 3 years. And so then we both went to Purdue. He actually came kicking and screaming because he's a Arizona native and it's snowy up there.
That's rare too.
So, but I love Purdue University. And then we made the decision at one point. I was actually diagnosed with cancer. And so at that time we made a decision to come back to Arizona and where our family was, and so we did. And then after a little bit of a time away, I made the decision that I could, I was in remission and I could go back and work, and so ASU wanted me to work for them. And my writing coach and I had who was Dwayne Rowan. He was my writing coach while I was working, through all of my PhD and everything, and then working through getting papers published. And so I said, I think I'll visit my writing coach. I had no idea he was the dean of the college and the provost. So he says, I told him where I probably would be working. And he says, well, my college has openings for someone like you because you write and you're also in the visual communications area. And so that's how I ended up there.
And I did some research, you've written some impressive papers, but can you share about your book, The Second Act? Because you mentioned your cancer, and I was just very touched by that book. So reading some background information about it. So can you share about that?
Yes, well I've actually, I wrote an academic textbook on creative thinking for the engineer and technologist. And then because I know book publishing and I know how to put books together and publish them, I decided before I did the book, I actually tried out for a second act. And that's where you actually have to go in front of an audience of people and you have to give your testimony and your story. And so I did that, and then when they found out that I could also publish books, we took all the testimonies and I made them into a book. And that's how it got published. And I think I published 4 of them a year for a number of years. And then the pandemic hit, and of course we couldn't perform at the Scottsdale Center for the Arts because of the pandemic. And so then the book ended at that point. But it brought me into doing stand-up comedy because we were in my stand-up comedy routine. I'm Mama Laverne and he's Coach, and so whenever I give jokes, it's always about him. and so that was the one thing that I decided that I was going to do something that I probably would never have done, except for I was in remission and I was going to try something I never would try, and I thought, okay, stand-up comedy, because I'm sometimes take myself too seriously, and so I decided I was going to go the other route.
Well, that reminds me of one of the things I wanted to mention that's a description about your book, that it's sometimes humorous, sometimes touching, and always inspiring. And the name is, well, is there one book or are there several books in that second act?
There's a number of books.
Okay.
I think we've probably done about 12 or there's a lot.
No, there's quite
Yeah.
Now, do you think you'll go back to performing now that we're getting through the pandemic? Or have you satisfied your
I
stage?
think I've satisfied that. I think I've satisfied. He was my best critic on that, because I would try my jokes out on him, and he would say, "Well, Laverne, do you want them to laugh?" And I said, "Well, of course." And he'd say, "You'd better ramp it up." And he'd say, "But Carl, these jokes are about you." He says, "You gotta ramp it up." You know, so
It was terrible.
so it was. I had to get slightly blue.
Oh my gosh, my son is a writer for TV. I think you guys should have a TV show. You're so adorable. Oh my goodness. Can you share with us some places, maybe you've always lived in the same place in Tempe, but what neighborhoods or cross streets have you lived, and where do you live now?
Well, probably our favorite place was in the Bradley homes. That is, they were north of Southern, near college, and that was a great neighborhood. Had a lot of professors, some business people, but it was very, very pleasant to raise a family in.
And do you still live there, or
No, unfortunately, well, we live in Dobson Ranch now. Yeah, but yeah, we lived there a number of years, and it was brought a lot of happy memories.
That's where we really raised our family. Was there.
did you have some favorite places in the neighborhood or in Tempe that you either went to eat or recreate, either places that are gone now or places that are still there? Sometimes it's fun to recall favorite places you went as a family or just
Well, not as a
dates.
family, but in high school, I remember the A&W root beer place, where they'd come with their roller skates and they'd
Up to
serve
the car
you.
window.
Oh, yeah. And that was really sad when that went away.
Yeah, when you're going to high school, it is fun to recall some of those places. And can you remind us, where was Brad's coffee shop?
It was on Rural Road between Broadway and Southern.
Oh, okay.
Broadway and Apache?
Now you've got me confused.
North of Broadway. How about that?
Yeah,
That
you're
works,
right.
yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Does faith or spirituality play a role in your life, and would you like to share something about that?
Well, in my opinion, faith means an awful lot. I just a few years ago, I sort of turned against the man-made religions and that kind of thing for personal reasons. But I'm very, very religious without that.
I think it would be called more spiritual because, Carl and I are really different people, and we come from really different backgrounds, but the reasons why we're here on this earth and what we're supposed to do is exactly the same. We just have different paths that we go to get there, and both of us have a deep faith, and we believe that talk is cheap, and the only way that you really know what someone is made of is by their actions. And so, and Carl's a bit of an academic too, we do a lot of studying about religions. We've read all different kinds of books. Basically, we got married in the First United Methodist Church in Tempe, and we love that church, and we've loved that. But with the pandemic that happened, it was really did have it did make a mark on us going to church, but it doesn't mean that we don't live our lives the same way. And, you know, so that's how that goes.
And you have traveled places. I mean, you mentioned Purdue, but if you've traveled in other places, have your travels influenced how you think about Tempe?
Well, we've been to Ireland and to different areas in the United States here, but it always made me feel good to come back to Tempe. That had a special place. It seemed like home to me, and I know it did to Laverne also. Yeah, it made me really, a lot of places we went to, it really made me appreciate what Tempe was about.
Well, I lived in Germany for 3 years when I was a little girl, and lived in Kansas and Virginia. And then I came to Arizona, and I feel the same way. I mean, Tempe is always home for us. It doesn't matter where we live, whether we lived in Gilbert or you know, Mesa or wherever. Tempe is always hometown for us. And I think it's because, you know, I mean, I remember it when on Southern Avenue there were canals running on either side of it. And when my friend Robbie English Palmer drove her dad's car off into the canal, you know, I mean, because the roads were so narrow, you know, and, you know, I just remember how Rural Road was called Rural Road because it was a dirt road. And my brother Glenn and I would ride our bicycle down Rural Road, and we would ride to Papago, which is like 5 miles and back, but it was dirt. And you know, so I just have wonderful memories. I was really active in student council and very active with the actual city council people in the leadership groups and things like that as a high school student.
Oh, wow.
So I've seen it grow and
seen and experienced a lot of changes in Tempe as it has grown, because you really do have such deep roots here. I'm sure it happens where you run into former students or former athletes that you have the chance to reconnect. And
well, Carl has lots of times firemen and policemen stopped at our house to come to see him who were his former students.
Oh, how fun.
And everywhere we go, we've always had that connection.
Yeah, that's been one of the greatest joys of being a teacher and a coach, is to have kids even back from the late 60s and I mean lots of kids you don't even realize that you affected come up, and they're sincere about it too, that they stay in contact and really voice their appreciation for things that we brought out in them.
Yeah.
And I worked really hard for my PhD, but they never called me Dr. Harris. I was always Mrs. Coach Harris.
I have joked with my family that if I had a PhD, they would be calling me Dr. Hirsch. So that'll probably never happen, but it's definitely a respectable thing to earn for sure. This can feel like an awkward question, but it's so important for posterity, and I want to ask each one of you, how would you like not only your kids and grandkids and future generations, but maybe even, you know, former students to remember you and think of you?
I would like to have them remember me as someone that impacted their life in a really good way, that made them not only a better citizen, but a lot of good things happened to them because they were associated with me.
Wonderful. Laverne?
I think I'd like people to remember me as someone who was very resilient, someone who was not afraid to stand up for what I believed, someone who could care less whether you were a man or a woman. If the job had to be done, you'd get it done. I also would want people to remember me as someone who loved my friends and my family deeply, and that's probably the most important thing to me.
Oh, wonderful. Is there anything else, whether it's about your life and experiences in Tempe or together, or your work or involvement in the community that I didn't ask you about, that you'd want to share a story or something that was important to you or particularly meaningful? If there's something I didn't ask and you'd like to share.
Well, the point that I think is really important, and as far as I'm concerned, is that I don't regret one bit the decision I made to become a teacher and a coach, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though at times it was frustrating, but if you stay positive and keep a good attitude, and that it all works out, and I wouldn't trade my career for anything, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I will say something about that career. Of course I will, right?
Sure you will.
In one of my lives, I actually was a student teacher. I was certified in K through 12. And one of my students that I had in my class would hardly even talk to me. He was very quiet, and he was a freshman. He just didn't seem to talk to anyone. And somehow in conversation, he overheard that Coach Harris was my husband. And he just lit up at me and he said, "You're Coach Harris's wife?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you know what he did for me?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "When I was in the 8th grade, I was this really overweight kid, and we had to pass the fitness test. And one of the things that we had to do is we had to run around the field." And he said, everyone was laughing at me because they knew I couldn't do it. And I was so embarrassed and so humiliated. And Coach Harris said, "Hop on my back." They didn't say that you couldn't run it on my back. And he ran the field with him on his back so that he could pass the test. And after he found out I was Coach Harris's wife, he talked to me. So I remember that. That meant a lot.
That is a great story. Thank you for sharing that. That's so meaningful. Yeah. Laverne, was there anything I didn't ask you about your life and experiences in Tempe or together or your work? If there's something about like your artwork that you might want to share, I'd love to hear about that. I'm chair of the Chandler Arts Commission, so I'm a little partial to art.
Okay,
but,
well that's great.
I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I have a new website that's coming up. It's called the Abe Harris Studio, and I'm actually showcasing some of my art and then some of the prints that I'm going to be making, and that will be coming up soon. I will keep you in contact with that.
Yeah.
But I have really, art has always been my therapy, and I also write poetry. But what I do is, the poetry is in my head, the words are in my head, and that's how it starts first. And then the words, then I start painting on the canvas, and then the words go in my painting. And that's how my paintings take place. And so it's a good combination between my writing and my art.
But we also like to open it up if other people want to ask questions, so I'll ask Dwayne.
Yes, I have one for you and one for you.
Okay.
So first of all, I was wondering if you would like to tell people about how you got the name Laverne.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm actually, you've heard of trophy wives. Well, I'm a trophy daughter. And my father, George Abe, when he was a senior in high school, was awarded a trophy. It was called the Laverne Olson Trophy. And it was given to the athlete in their school who was one of the best citizens. So it was for citizenship and all around athletic ability. And this was really important because my dad was Japanese American, and this was a very tense time. And being two Japanese families in the town, and so that trophy meant the world to him. And so when I was born, my parents decided to name me after the trophy, and they put an E behind the name because he said it would make it more feminine. So, but I was named after the trophy.
Oh, that's a great story.
And you worked with Harry Mitchell, right?
Yes.
Could you say a little bit about what it was like working with him?
He was in the history department, and I would see him, and he was always just a number one person to talk with. And I know he got into the politics part and all of that, but he was a real joy, a real down-to-earth teacher at Tempe High, and I had a lot of respect for him.
Yeah. Thank you.
He's very, very good. I knew Mary Ann also, his wife.
And Mikkel.
Hi. First of all, I'm just so happy I could be here tonight and listen to your interview. It's very, very touching and nice to get to know such, what I just kind of call good people. There's so many good people in the world, and you're definitely among them. So my question is for Laverne, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's sensitive or not, but you said your father's Japanese American and your mother was German, and so you were born, did you say 52? So not that long after World War II.
Right.
But you don't necessarily look Japanese if people see you, right? And so what was that like? From then till now, I feel like we've come a ways in our racial harmony, but we're still so far apart. So what advice do you have for people from your perspective?
Well, it's odd that you should mention, because I wanted to bring photos and all the, and he said no, so. But I did look much more Japanese when I was younger.
Okay.
And then my family is from more the northern part, which had the rounder eyes. So it's like we don't all look alike. And so see, that's part of it, and so when I was younger, I did look, because I had dark brown hair, and I did look more Japanese, but I went to McClintock High School that was almost all Caucasian. I think we had 2 blacks at our school and just a few Hispanics. That was it, but it was, and Tempe was mainly Caucasian. And now you can see the demographics have completely changed. And I think what happened with me is when people found out that I was multicultural, they were rather shocked when they found out my father was Japanese and my mother was an immigrant from Germany. So I was the first English speaking in my family, and they were, that was surprising. So they, when I grew up, they just thought that I was one of them, even though I was really like someone who was white on the outside and pastel yellow on the inside, because I looked at things very differently than a lot of people did. And I'm afraid now, we've had so many problems with people not caring about the differences. I loved the differences in people. And in fact, I remember that was one of the reasons why my son asked to go to Tempe High School, was because there were a lot of different kids starting to come to that school, and he said he didn't like people that looked just like him, that he learned much more from people that were different than him. And so that's how I've always felt. You know, I celebrate people's differences, and I want to know why people are different. And I think the pendulum always swings. It goes one way and then it goes the other, and hopefully it'll rest somewhere in the middle. But that's probably one of the things in our latter years that bothers us the most, is we were both hoping, both of us, that the older we got, the wiser we would get, and the more things we would understand. And it's just the opposite. The older we are, the more questions we have, and the more we don't understand what's going on. You know, and if people would just live their lives with their hearts and stop. I have many friends that politically and religiously are completely different than what I believe, but I love them, and they're entitled. You know, I give them the respect for whatever they think, as long as they give me my respect. But it's not like that with a lot of people, and that makes me very sad.
Well, and it's only for your children to say how you influenced them, but it's clear that you were such a positive influence. For example, your son wanting to go to Tempe High because he wanted that diversity, and your daughter also going into teaching, and so many things that you've mentioned. So it's like I said, it's for them to say, but it's clear that you've had a wonderful influence on your children and the community and students, and we just thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and being a little humorous and also inspiring.
And should we add that we have 14 grandchildren?
Oh my gosh, yes, that's awesome.
And half of them are adopted from Ethiopia and Chicago, so we got a
14.
United Nations.
So your son has how many children?
Three girls.
And somebody do the math really quick. So that
Yes.
14 minus 3.
Yeah.
So your daughter has.
Yeah, the rest.
Wow.
Wow.
So, anyway.
Oh, how fun. And now, are they close enough that you can visit them?
Our daughter is, and our son is in Colorado Springs. But that's only an hour and a half flight. So,
Oh, well, congratulations on so many grandchildren too. How fun. Thank you again so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you.